All right, good morning, everybody. Go ahead and log on in. All right, we have a few people in here. Go ahead and unmute myself. Good morning. Can you hear me? Good morning, everybody. All right, I think we are in here. I cannot tell if you guys are picking up my. All right, good morning, Gavin. Good morning, Raylan. How are you today? It's hard to hear me. What about now? Is that a little bit better? It's breaking up. Let me see. Does that help? It's like a storm. Huh. It's like a storm. I don't know if I can fix that. I'm doing well. Good morning, Faith. How are you? But the background. Oh, I got an idea. Hold on. Oh, I'll go into here. What about that? I think I know what it is. All right. Give me 1 second. I believe that's my AC kicking in. All right. All right, that should fix that. Hey, can you guys hear me? Is it coming in a little bit clearer? All right. So let's go ahead and get started. We're actually going to cover a couple of things today as we go through this. All right, fantastic. Okay, here we go, guys. Welcome to our next little stream. Today we are going to be covering information about the end of the Greco-Persian War. You guys, your project has been going along with this, and that was my plan today, was to just go over some of the battles and make sure we're all on the same page on how the Greco-Persian War ended and what was the outcome of that war. So why did it end the way it did? And what were the strengths, what was the outcome of that war in general? Because wars, literally, the best definition I've ever heard for war is that it's the continuation of policy and procedure by other means, all right? So when it comes to politics, it's just a continuation of that. It's the continuation of how states are continuing to, you know, deal with each other. Maybe they're going to end the war on new terms, new trade terms, new trade agreements. Maybe they end the war with one state dissolving and being obtained by the other state. So war is just a continuation of politics by other means. It's possibly the greatest definition I have heard about it. So we're going to continue to talk about the Greco-Persian War. We're going to talk about what it means for Greece following the war, but specifically we're going to talk about the Persian invasion today. And yes, it is going along with the sand table project that I assigned with you guys Tuesday, Faith. But this is going to be more about the specific battles. So you're going to have an idea of what they look like. I've seen a lot of them come in. I think you guys are doing a great job working on that project. And I hope this brings some clarity if you maybe still had some questions. Just to clarify what's going on. All right. You guys ready to go? All right. It looks like that. Let's start moving. Here we go. Greece does the impossible. The final battles of the Greco-Persian War. All right. The first thing we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about the naval aspect. Before we talked about the land units, today we're going to talk about the naval units. And the naval units we're going to talk about specifically are called the trireme. Now, the trireme is a boat. It's a boat that has 3 oars. And those oars help drive the boat, or 3 rows of oars. All right. There we go. Okay. So, the trireme was very fast and maneuverable, and a long bronze-sheathed ram on the prow of the boat. A ram is a type of device that's designed to break other devices, all right? A ram is typically very blunt. It can be sharp, but you slam it into something else, and it breaks. Just like the goat equivalent of a ram. It's an animal that has horns on top of its head. It's designed to run into things really, really hard. The trireme is designed to run into other boats really, really hard. It uses that brass ram at the front of the boat, not only to smash into other boats and puncture it, but also a fast-moving trireme could smash directly through another boat. They're quite a powerful warship. And the trireme was really, really, really best used by the Athenians, and it helped them defy one of the largest navies in the world. The trireme was a ship that consisted of 3 lines of rowers who worked together to move the ship. That's where the name trireme comes from. You can already see the word tri, and then reme being lines, so that was how they named the ship, 3 lines of rowers. The trireme had a main square sail, but it was primarily propelled by rowers. So even though it had a sail, it only used that for cruising. It really didn't use that for any reason other than to move around very easily. For the most part, they used oars to row the boat. This is a trireme. You can see the square sails. This one actually has a couple square sails. They would have been taken down before battle and stored on the shore. And you can see the sets of oars in the water. That's how they would propel the ship primarily. On the front, that yellow piece, that is the ram that was designed to puncture enemy ships. So this is this is exactly what a trireme would have looked like. It was steered by 2 oars in the back of the boat. Someone would stand up there to steer the boat, and this is what the trireme would have looked like. It would have been seen on the battlefield. Primarily, it didn't carry that many soldiers. The contingent on top of it is really just there to repel boarders or to board other ships. Every Athenian was a rower. That was one of the things. If you voted in Athens, you could also row a trireme. And so this would have been filled to the brim with men from Athens or Corinth or any other Greek city-state, including the Persians as well. They filled their triremes as well, and this is how they propelled themselves. The trireme carried approximately 200 to 180 men. 180 of those served as rowers, and the other 20 were a mix of archers and hoplites, commanders, that sort of thing. The main weapon of the trireme was the brass ram that was located on the front of the ship. That ram was designed to punch holes into the side of enemy ships. It could, if moving quick enough, run straight through the side of one. The trireme also carried a small contingent of soldiers who served in both offensive and defensive roles. They would stand on top of the ship. They would shoot arrows at enemy soldiers on top of their boats. If they could, they would board the enemy ship and try to take out their commanders, maybe take out the steering, and that ship would be inoperable. Or they'd capture it and they'd take it to shore, where they would take over possession of the ship. All right, so the trireme was a very fantastic weapon. It was very maneuverable, especially the Greek version of it. So this is a great diagram of the absolute carnage that a trireme can cause. In this picture, we see the trireme, of course, with its sails down. It is just smashed through the side of an enemy ship, using that that ram at the front of the boat, that ram at the front of the boat, to absolutely crush through it. It would have been absolutely a terrifying job to be inside the trireme, especially if you can't see what's going on outside. And just the fact that the combat would have been extremely violent. That had been a strong punch. And again, what an incredible picture or image of what a trireme battle would have looked like. The Persian Navy. So the Persian Navy was made up of ships from all across the Persian Empire. And this actually wasn't that helpful for them. It allowed them to have a large navy, but because their empire was so vast, we're talking Egypt all the way to Tracia, it's just a massive empire. And so because of that, when they get all these people to come fight for them, they don't all speak the same language. That makes it very difficult to communicate. And communication in warfare is absolutely essential. It's one of the most important features of the military, right? It's how to communicate with your soldiers on the battlefield, giving them up-to-date orders, and so you can react to changes on the battlefield. The Persian Navy speaks many different languages. They have some inconsistencies on who's the commander, and so they really don't work that well together. It actually ends up coming back to bite them in a really bad way. The size of the Persian Navy is highly disputed. Herodotus suggested that the Persians began the campaign with more than 3,000 triremes. That's a massive number of triremes. It's probably not close to that. Other historians have suggested somewhere around 1,000 triremes. It's just a very inconsistent number on all fronts. The Greek Navy. The Greek Navy was primarily comprised of ships from Athens and Corinth. The Greek ship numbers are disputed by the historians, but the average number of Greek ships is somewhere around 330 triremes. The leader of the Greek Navy was the brilliant Themistocles, and he really showed his brilliance not only at the Battle of Salamis, but also the Battle of Artemisium. And so we're actually going to look at some of his strategies he used to be successful in the battle. All right, let's talk about how the Persians begin the campaign. So we talked a little bit about the navies, we talked about the triremes. Now I want you to watch, or I want you to see how the invasion began. So if you look on this map, to the very right of the corner of your screen, you'll see a red dotted line. That red dotted line is Xerxes' units as they are marching into Greece. It's the Persian land force. And so they start off in modern-day Turkey, really Ionia, where the invasion, or the Greeks first interfered with Persian affairs. You can see that they crossed across the Hellespont. The Hellespont, again, is that very small point in between Europe and Asia. It's that disconnecting piece of water that disconnects the two continents. You can see that the Persians had to cross over it. I'm going to show you how they did that in a second. It's really cool. They had two different things. They had a land force and a fleet. The fleet followed the land force around the water to stay connected and close to the land force as possible. And you can see they follow them all the way up through Thracia, through Macedonia, through Thessaly, and they're heading down towards Greece. Now, as they come to Thessaly, the fleet has to try to stay close to the army, and they show up near Thermopylae. So this is where our battle of Eratomisium is going to be held in the straits near Thermopylae. The Greeks' suggestion was they have to block the Persians from entering that gap and supporting the their soldiers at Thermopylae from getting behind the Spartans. And so the Athenians and Corinthians block the straits at Artesium to prevent the Persians from reinforcing their troops. As it continues down, we'll see the Battle of Salamis and Plataea, and that will be the end of the campaign for the Persians. But why do you think the Persians had to be very close to their land force? Why do you think their navy had to go along the coast? It actually has two good reasons. I want to see what you guys can come up with. So why did they have to be near their army? What would get stolen, Gavin? Why did the Persians have to keep their navy and their army close together? Okay, very close, Gavin, with goods. So the Persians had to keep their navy very close to the shoreline because the navy carried a lot of supplies for the army. What's easier? Having to pick up and move a lot of supplies on your shoulder, on your back, having to carry it, or if you could just load it on a boat and that boat meets you every single night with all the supplies in it. So how's it easier to move goods? Is it easier to move goods on the sea or on land? Very close. Protection, yeah, very, very close. So there is some protection added by having the fleet there. Number one, it's protection for the fleet. The fleet really can't sail across the Aegean Sea. If you take a look, there's a portion on this map that says storm off of Euboria destroys large portion of Persian fleet. The triremes were very, very, very bad about taking on water and sinking. They weren't that great in storms. Um, they didn't have very wide or deep bow, or didn't have very deep bows of the ship, so that it really didn't have the balance that you need. If you guys take a look at sailboats, what you'll notice is that they have very, very long fins that go down into the water. These provide stabilization for the boat, and I completely forgot what you call that on a sailboat. I knew this summer, and now I'm just forgetting it. But they have these long boards on smaller sailboats, but on larger sailboats, it's built into the hull. It goes down into the water, and it provides stability for the sails, and so the boat doesn't roll over. That's what it's designed to do. These Greek ships didn't have that. They were designed that you could row them literally onto the shore and store them there. So the reason that they're not having this ability to dock their boats meant that their boats really weren't very good out in the ocean. Storms could come in and blow them over. The Persians found this out in a very just terrible way off the bat, off off Iberia when they get smashed by a storm. Historians have suggested maybe 2,000 ships sunk during that storm. Absolutely astronomical storm that just destroyed everything in the Persian Navy. Really, really limited them. But the ships carried supplies, the ships carried soldiers. It was a good weapon as well. If you get hampered by forces, say at Thermopylae, why not just sail around them and offload behind them? So the fleet provides an extra offensive weapon that you can use in the battlefield. Now, let's take a look. This is the bridge over the Hellespont. What the Persians did is they parked all their boats next to each other, and they built a walkway across the Hellespont. It's something like 12 miles long in between there. So they built this huge bridge where their troops could get on it and walk across from the Persian Empire into Greece to begin their invasion. So I think it's a really cool picture. Make sure you guys take a good look at this. I really love the idea of this, and this is how Xerxes moved his troops from one side to the other. Quite a brilliant use of the resources he had. Really great engineering to come up with something like this, and it really helped the Persians get to Greece when they needed to get to Greece. It allowed them to bring a much larger army, and it took less time. The Battle of Erath. So in August of 480 BC, the Persian fleet commanded by Xerxes made sail for Greece. They followed the Grecian coast, moving south from Tracia, that's actually the Latin for Tracy, and near Thermopylae, the Persians encountered the Athenian navy. The forces drew close together and engaged in a 3-day naval battle. After learning of the defeat of the Greeks at Thermopylae, the Athenian navy withdrew from the engagement. So, that is it on that part. Now I actually want to show you the battle. So, let's pull this on over. So, this is the Battle of Artyom, and this is a really cool resource that I was able to find the other day, and I want to show you the Battle of Artyom using this resource. So, let's check it out. Alright, so let's go back a couple steps. Alright, the Greek allied fleet was stationed at Cape Artyom to obstruct possible Persian fleet maneuvers to bypass their defensive land, or their land defenses position at Thermopylae. On the first day, the Persians saw the Greeks fleeing toward them, or fleet rowing towards them, and decided to seize the opportunity to attack, even though it was late in the day. Outnumbered, the much smaller Greek fleet turned the bows on their enemy, probably on a crescent formation, with the wings drawn back to prevent the Persian ships from sailing around the Allied line. Having assumed their chosen formation, the Greek ships moved suddenly outwards, rowing into the Persian ships and catching them off guard. Something similar had happened at the Marathon land battle. Surprised, the Persians could not use their advantage in numbers and better seamanship. It took some time for the Greeks to become the best seamen in the Eastern Mediterranean, and people usually thought that it was not always that way. The Persians lost the encounter with 30 of their ships having captured or sunk. So, going back, again, the Greeks are able to defeat the Persians on that battle. On the first day. During the night, a thunderstorm broke, preventing the Greeks from setting off southwards to encounter a Persian detachment sent around their position. However, the storm also hit the Persian ships, driving them off the coast and into the rocky coast of Euboea. Due to the storm, the Persian fleet lost many ships. On the second day, which was also the second day of the Battle of Thermopylae, the Persian fleet, now recovering from 2 storms, declined to attack the Greeks and instead attempted to make their fleet seaworthy again. The Greeks received a reinforcement of 53 ships from Athens. That's where that extra boat came from. Late afternoon, the Greeks attacked a patrol of Sicilian ships, destroying them before retreating at nightfall. On the third day, the Persians attacked the Allied lines in full force. The Greeks attempted to block the Straits of Artesium as best they could. The Persians formed a semicircle of ships and tried to enclose the Allied fleet, upon which the Greeks rowed forward and joined battle. The battle raged all day long. When the fleet finally disengaged at nightfall, both sides had suffered roughly equal losses. However, the smaller Greek fleet could not afford such losses. Half the Athenian ships, the largest contingent of the fleet, were damaged or lost. Then a liaison ship from Thermopylae arrived and told the allies of the destruction of the Greek rear guard at Thermopylae. Since holding the Straits of Artesium now held no more strategic value or purpose, given their losses, the allies decided to evacuate immediately. So that's the Battle of Artesium. Artemisium. It is one of the first major naval engagements of this war, and it ends up with a victory going to really the Persians. Just like Thermopylae, the Greeks did their best. This wasn't a last stand, it was just a blocking technique. It had done its job, but after Thermopylae fell, there was really no reason to stay engaged in this battle. So they were able to withdraw. All right. All right, let's see if we can get the next one. All right, and we're going to end today by talking about the Battle of Plataea. All right, this is the last battle of the war between the Greeks and the Persians. It follows the incredible victory at Salamis, which you guys are more than free to look up, and we're going to talk about Plataea now. So, under the guidance of the commanding general Pausanias, the Greeks took up positions opposite the Persian line, but remained on high ground. The Greeks did not want to fight a battle around the Persian camp, since the plain gave an advantage to the Persian cavalry. Both sides remained in their position for 11 days. So the Battle of Plataea, there's a small river that runs through Plataea, and the Greeks don't want to have to cross it. Crossing rivers typically isn't the best strategic move that you can make in warfare. Your soldiers end up getting wet feet, they end up getting fatigued, they could drown. It's not always a good strategy to cross rivers, and it's a natural choke point. It definitely slows down your troops, and if they're fighting up the hills of the bank, they're fighting uphill. That's not good, right? It's not something you want to do. They also don't want to go to the plains of Plataea because the Persian cavalry is there. And now the Persian cavalry is probably one of their best units they have. It's very strong. It's very efficient on the plains. It's not very good on the hills where the hoplites are. So they want to avoid getting in contact with that cavalry, so they're going to hang back. Mardinius initiated hit and run with cavalry attacks against the Greek lines, possibly trying to lure the Greeks down to the plain in pursuit to begin the battle. It's just a common technique that generals would use in the ancient times. They use their cavalry to shoot a bunch of arrows, try to make your enemy mad, see if they pursue you. Cavalry always looks pretty small, but they could definitely do some damage. After some initial success, the Persian cavalry commander Matthias was killed. With his death, the Persian cavalry retreated. So, it's actually a funny story. When he hit the lines, he actually attacked where the Athenians were, and they rushed forward, and they saw the leader of the Persian cavalry, and so they grabbed him off his horse and pulled him to the ground. And so they're trying to kill this guy, but they can't figure out how to do it. This was one of these rare opportunities where a Persian was actually wearing armor that wasn't just light armor. He was actually wearing very heavy scale mail armor, which is kind of like the scales on a snake or a dragon. They overlink with pieces of metal. And so they actually had a really, really hard time taking this guy out. But when they did, it was a big victory because this was an important leader for the Persians. And by eliminating him, they took out a pretty good strategist and leader for the cavalry. It was actually a very decisive blow. I don't think historians put enough emphasis on the impact of that singular event, but it definitely changed the way the battle took place. Encouraged by their small victory, the Greeks moved forward, still remaining on higher ground, so to a newer position near Mendonius' camp. The Spartans and the Trojans were on the right, the Athenians on the left, and the other contingents in between. At this point, though, the Greeks were a little bit suffering because they didn't have the water source they needed. In response to the Greek advantage, Mendonius brought his army up to Lesbos and arrayed them for battle. However, neither the Persians nor the Greeks would attack. Their army stayed campaign in their locations for 8 days, during which new Greek troops arrived. Mardonius then sought to break the stalemate by sending his cavalry to attack the passes of Mount Citarian. The raid resulted in the capture of a convoy of provisions intended for the Greeks. So food intended for the Greeks gets captured by the cavalry. Another great technique to use for your cavalry is to send them around the flanks, figure out where the enemy's supplies are, and cut those off. Yeah, actually, Vero, armies a lot of times will charge down the hill while the enemy army is coming up the hill. That's a great question. It's not a 50-50 chance. The advantage is still on the defender of the hill. Height is always an advantage, or traditionally has always been an advantage. There have been cases where height wasn't an advantage. If we go back to the Civil War in the United States, basically where I grew up, there was a battle on a mountain called Lookout Mountain, and the hill was so steep, or the mountain's so steep there, that the cannonballs in the bore of the guns would actually roll out of the cannons, making it an ineffective weapon on the battlefield. And so it can actually be a disadvantage to you. For the most part, though, having the height is an advantage. It gives you the ability to see what's going on. All right, back to ancient Greece. But great question, Beryl. 2 more days passed, during which time the supply lines of the Greeks continued to be menaced. Mendonius also began to cut the supply of troops going to the Greeks. So he's trying to limit what the Greeks are able to do. He's really trying to draw battle. Again, the Persians are on a timeline. They can only keep their troops in the field for so long. They can only do that because they're invading. They have fewer supplies, while the Greeks have the supplies they need. This is their home front. This is their terrain. They know it. They know what's going on here. All right. Mardonius then launched another cavalry raid on the Greek lines, which succeeded in blocking the Greco-Persian spring, which had been the only source of water for the Greek army. So now he's cutting off their resources, troops. He's cutting off the springs from the Greeks. He's limiting their ability to fight. Low on food and water and supplies, the Greeks decide to retreat to a position in front of Plataea, from where they could guard the passes and have access to fresh water to prevent the Persian cavalry from attacking during the retreat. It has to be performed at night. The retreat did not go well. The Allied forces in the center of Math missed their appointed position and ended up scattered in front of Plataea itself. So the Greeks messed it up. The right side units, I don't know if you can see my mouse on the screen, but the 4 guys on the right, those were mostly Spartans. They didn't really know what was going on, and they refused to believe the Athenians. They didn't really trust them. Again, it's the Greeks. They don't trust each other. And so they're just going to stay put. The Athenians withdraw, and the Corinthians are also going to withdraw, but it's going to take a little bit. They really messed it up. It was a great opportunity to attack. The Athenians, Trojans, and Spartans, who had been guarding the rear of the retreat, had not even begun to retreat. By daybreak, Spartans and Trojans retreated to a higher position, while the Athenians at first retreated direct towards Plataea. Once the Persians discovered that the Greeks had abandoned their positions and appeared to be in retreat, Mardonius decided to set off an immediate pursuit with the elite Persian infantry, and the rest of the Persian army also followed. So this would have been, his elite infantry would have been his immortals, all right, and the cavalry. The Spartans and the Trojans had left a rear guard under Amphirminus, which began to withdraw under pressure from the Persian cavalry to join them. Persians sent a messenger to the Athenians asking them to join up with them, with the Spartans, but the Athenians had been engaged by the Theban phalanx and weren't able to assist. So What happened is there were Greeks that turned against the rest of Greece. This was the Thebans. They joined with the Persians, and so the Athenians and the Thebans are going to fight hoplite to hoplite. Sorry, I messed that up. The Persians did not. That was the Pusians sent the message. The Spartans and the Trojans were first assaulted by the Persian cavalry, while the Persian infantry made their way forward. Then they planted their shields and began shooting arrows at the Greek while the cavalry withdrew. Greek soldiers began to fall under the barrage of arrows and asked their general to attack. However, Persidius refused to advance because good omens were not divined in the goat sacrifice that were performed. The very superstitious Spartans accepted this and remained in their position as more and more Persian infantry joined in the battle. At some point, the Trojans started to waver at the Persian lines and started to advance at the Persian lines. Persidius claimed that he had finally received formidable omens and gave the command for the Spartans to advance. The genius of Persidius was now rewarded. Had the Greeks attacked earlier, the lighter Persian infantry would withdraw until the Greeks got tired and dispersed. Now the first Persian line could not retreat as they were pressed by their comrades coming from behind them. The numerically superior Persian infantry was much lighter than the Greek phalanx. As a marathon, despite their great courage, the Persians were no match for the heavier armored Greeks. At first, the Persians stood their ground and tried to break the Greek spears by holding on to them, but the Greeks responded by switching to swords. As long as Mardonius remained in the battle, the Persians kept fighting. Eventually, a Spartan named Aramintus saw him astride his white horse, picked up a large rock off the ground, and threw it hard at Mardonius. It hit him in the head and killed him. Pretty cool, right? So a Spartan sees this general, goes, you know what? I'm going to take care of this real quick. Grab the big rock and hit him in the head with it. I mean, awesome throw, number one. Awesome story, number two. I mean, what a cool way for you to take out the enemy commander and really make a massive impact on the battle. That's why his name is still remembered in history from the impact that he made during the battle. While with Mardonius' death, the Persians began to flee. Although the bodyguard remained, they were annihilated. The Greeks absolutely wiped them out. The Persians fled in disorder, mainly to their camp. However, Artybus had disagreed with Mardonius about attacking the Greeks, as he had not fully engaged the forces under his command. He led his men away from the battlefield on the road to Thessaly, hoping to escape. Meanwhile, the Athenians had triumphed in a tough battle against the Thebans. They retreated from the battle, but in a different direction from the Persians, allowing them to escape without further losses. The allied Greeks, reinforced by the contingents who had not taken part in the main battle, then stormed the Persian camp. Although the Persians initially defended the wall vigorously, it was eventually breached, and the Persians packed tightly together, and the camp were slaughtered by the Greeks. Of the Persians who had retreated to the camp, scarcely 3,000 were left alive. All right, so Plataea, absolutely a unbelievable victory for the Greeks. They literally wiped out the Persians. This ended the Persian invasion of Greece and allowed Greece to gain the dominance in the region that they had for so long. Hey, Val, I start this class early. I always start this lecture at 8 o'clock. I want to go ahead and do that so I have my help session afterwards. So my section actually runs from 8 to 9:30. I start my videos at 8 o'clock to get everyone up to date. All right. So, guys, that is it for today on this. I'm going to be in my live video to help you guys with anything you need. I hope you enjoyed this lecture. The magic word for this lecture, all right, the magic word for this lecture, and again, this is just for you, it's not for other people. The magic word for this lecture is going to be Plataea. It's going to be Plataea. All right, guys, that is it for today. I hope you found something interesting about this. If you have any questions, I'm going to be in my live lecture room here in a few minutes to answer those questions. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day.